You know civilization is in trouble when the guy on top of a country starts to take out all of his generals. When one tiny island can completely cut the paycheck off of an entire nation. And when one political party seems to celebrate insanity as progress, and when a movement that claims to love the Bible starts sounding more like TikTok conspiracy theories and Marxists than actually like Jesus Christ, the person who supposedly they emulate. So where are we? Right now, China's in free fall. Iran has a single economic jugular vein that Trump is going to exploit. The Democrats have completely lost their minds in all their agendas, and that cancer that is growing inside the politically right side of the aisle is just getting crazier and crazier and more offensive, if that's the right way of putting it. Welcome to the Ripple Effect. So let's go ahead and get into it. First off, let's talk about China. This is the problem that most people don't realize is we are told every day that China is a strong powerhouse, that they're constantly unstoppable, that they are efficient and disciplined, and they're just going to outperform us, outwork us. They're unified, and they're just going to roll over the entire world. But unfortunately, for them, that's not at all what it's going to be looking like there. And in fact, if you look at it, it's like a house of cards that's being built up that will eventually crumble. And when you look inside the regime, what you see right now is a lot of paranoia. In fact, Xi Jinping is spending a lot of time of replacing the top leaders of their military and a lot of people in their communist group there. And what's crazy is apparently I think this is the first year since like 2000 that they've had such a small assembly of their communist leaders, because he's bumped off so many, and so many of them are scared to death that apparently even retirement isn't saving you from being purged, because he's been purging so many people. Top generals, the defense ministers have been disappearing or fired, and in these anti-corruption crusade. And what's crazy is all this anti-corruption, they always seem to forget that the entire society is built on this corruption, even though they say that, you know, it's the anti-corruption that they're focusing on. And only corruption they care about is when they can use it against their enemies. And the problem is this is affecting China because it's a huge chunk of their military complex is just being completely wiped out or removed by Xi Jinping. And it doesn't sound like a military that's able to hold any kind of long-term power if you can't keep your generals in place. We are so efficient because we train how we fight. We fight how we train, and we work that way. We have the generals that are able to do that. But unfortunately, with a dictatorship that's as brittle as Xi Jinping's dictatorship, he has to constantly move people out of positions to consolidate power, to bring it underneath his own control. And next year he's going to have his election on his fourth term, even though he put himself as dictator for life. Apparently he still has to do another vote. If you're getting ready to fight a major war, like in Taiwan, you're not going to be firing your rocket force leader, your defense minister, and your top generals every few months, unless you're terrified that behind the scenes they're going to take over your country or your party. Which the problem is, since every single person there is been replaced basically through these kind of shenanigans, it makes sense that Xi Jinping would be worried that he'd be the next one to be removed along those same processes. So even though China is dangerous, we got to understand that the Communist Party is so corrupt and it's so messed up that there's a cancer within that is taking that country down. And they're starting to show how the housing bubbles and all these other things that they had that were helping to save them are all crashing down. And there's actually a really good channel if you want to watch on any of that stuff. It's called China Uncensored. It's really, really good. But what's interesting is if you combine China and Iran, because they're very heavily involved right now, you actually look at where Iran is very close to having all of its entire wealth cut off. Now, while China's worried about its elites, it is giving a lot of support to Iran. So you got to understand that there's a lot of support coming in from China and from Russia, whether it's tactical guidance of missiles and that kind of thing. They actually use their satellites for that kind of stuff. But the Islamic Republic has a jugular vein that can be controlled. And that is that even though it does run off of a lot of their idealisms, it also runs off of money. And everything requires money. And China's not going to support it unless it gets money out of this. And that money comes through one little tiny island, and I think it's called the Karg Island. And it is a 5-mile strip of land in the Persian Gulf And at times, up to 90% of the Iranian oil exports have gone through that one export terminal, meaning that that is the single port for which they refine and get it out of the country. And if we cut that off, you could immediately cut off all the funding that they have feeding that regime. Now, you control the finances and you control the entire fight that we have going on right now. Because they have all these things that they have right now, but it's not just what you're facing in Iran. It's what you're facing in Iran. It's what you're facing outside of Iran with Hezbollah and all the other crazy militias that they fund will no longer have funding if you remove that oil chain. Now, recent reports have said that Trump administration is considering taking the island, and that is like their Trump card. All puns intended, of course. And that pressure point could topple the government just that much quicker by removing all their funding. You can have as many ayatollahs as you want, but if you don't have any funding to support you, not even Russia and not even China will continue to support you in that, because they're already suffering to the point where the rial is like, I think they said 1 million rials gives you 70 cents. And that's before the war. I can only imagine what it's like right now. Now, the island itself would be hard because you have to understand it's not just the oil that is coming from the IRGC. It's the entire country's oil. So right now we've seen a lot of blowups of refineries and stuff like that. Not refineries, but like oil stuff in Iran. And people were freaking out saying our oil is going to go up and all that kind of stuff. And it is, but a lot of that is specifically the IRGC stuff. If you take the Karg Island, you're actually affecting all of it. But is it not moral to remove the funding source, if you can, for a terrorist regime that has been killing and murdering people, and up to 35,000 people of their own in just the last month? We have to make sure that our priorities are straight. And America, unfortunately, is having a hard time struggling with that, where they don't seem to feel like the priorities that should be there are there, meaning that everyone has their own priorities in what this war should be. And unfortunately, I don't think that a lot of Americans have the same. Now, when I was talking about the Democrats, this is what I want to get into. The Democrats are so focused on supporting all the worst beliefs in the world, like the idea that you can have as many genders as you want, and transgenderism is great, and you should mutilate children and all that kind of stuff. They're so focused on that they have to side with people that are on their side in supporting of them, even though they don't support their idealisms. For example, Iran. No one in Iran supports all their nonsense. No one does. The Ayatollah group doesn't support it. Doesn't matter. But they side with that kind of craziness because why? Because it furthers their agenda. And they on their craziness will defend the feelings of violent criminals before the safety of your families. They will march for terrorists in the streets against the very people who are now thankful that they're free from the people that were butchering them not that long ago. And these are the same people that paid the money for Hamas to invade Israel and to butcher all the Israelis there. This is the kind of people that they're supporting, that they're helping. And I would like to say that all the craziness is on the left. I would like to say that, but unfortunately I can't, because it's not just what's happening. It's not just what's happening on the left, because there's a cancer right now also in the conservative movement. And this is where Ben Shapiro calls it the horseshoe theory, but it's not just on the crazy lefties, because there's a lot of crazy people on the right. And the problem is they're no longer sane. They're no longer biblically accurate, and they're no longer mentally healthy. They seem to have completely lost their mental health in their focus on the wrong things. And their hatred specifically of Israel has just taken them to such an extent where it makes them, it literally makes them lefties all over again. It just completely turns them over into being lefties. And because they wrap around so far. Now, the cancer that's growing inside the conservative movement is slowly killing true biblical values from the inside out. Here's what I mean. on one hand, you have conservatives who are willing to call out the anti-Semitism, for calling out hatred of Israel, and for calling out people that make excuses for terrorist attacks. And on the other hand, you have now a growing crowd of people that are drifting to their own version of anti-Semitism and the conspiracy rabbit holes that they just constantly go down. I mean, it is getting crazy with the conspiracy theories that they're going. And here's my point. As soon as you get soft on the Israel issue, I'm talking about the conservatives, they get soft on the Israel issue and start being gently anti-Semitic. It's a very slippery slope to the Jews are behind every problem that has ever existed. It is crazy how quickly they can get down to it, to blame the Jews for everything. And you see it in the way some of the right-wing influencers talk about Israel. And what's crazy is I was watching, and I try to watch a few different shows so I can get a few different views every time. But even today, Michael Knowles, I stopped watching him today because he started off and he was immediately gleeful that according to him, Israel had gone too far for Trump and America's administration, and then we were going to correct those Jews. And it's just like, it's so weird that everything has to be framed as a Jewish plot or a Zionist scheme or a global conspiracy. And when you have people like we used to think that Candace was the only one that was, or not Candace, sorry. We used to think that, what was his name? Alex Jones was the only one that was crazy, right? And everything was a conspiracy and everything was wild crazy. And then Candace started coming out and being super crazy. And then we have Nick Fuentes. And then now we have Tucker Carlson going crazy. And then now we're at the point where even Megyn Kelly has been losing her mind. Someone who used to be reliable, but they can't help it. The moment you go down the anti-Jew hatred, it just takes you and absorbs you. And everything becomes, well, maybe the Jews are the problem. And the problem is that the young people are being infected with this stuff continuously, and it's not biblical conservatism. And I don't even care where you stand on Israel. The whole point is that when you start going down this stuff, you very quickly becomes old school, ugly, pagan, scapegoating, dressed up as something that in a box that the modern kids like. That's basically what it is. All you're doing is hating on Israel, which has happened through the entire history of the world. You're nothing new. You're nothing special for hating on Israel. Just to give you a heads up, okay? But the problem is they are now trying to twist scripture to make it sound like you shouldn't support Israel or Israel isn't something you should support. And when you go through the entire rich history of the Bible, you understand the value of Israel. You understand the value of what God puts in Israel when we care for it. And I'm not saying put Israel over our country. I'm saying put our Bible over our country. Put our Bible over Israel. Put the Bible over every choice and every belief that you have in your life, and everything will work out fine. But the problem is people are weakening in all their beliefs in the Bible, and they begin to twist scriptures to try to make it fit what they want. And again, that's where we get the horseshoe theory, where now it comes so far to the right that they're now sounding like the left in their hatred. And it's getting crazy. It's getting wild, some of the stuff that they're saying. Like, even, I mentioned this before, but Tucker Carlson saying we should have a DNA test of the Jews. And the reason why he's saying that is not because he thinks that the Jews should have a legitimate DNA test to give them the land and that he would be okay with that. No, he thinks that because if they take it back to Abraham, that through Ishmael, a lot of the Arabs would inherit the land of Israel. So he's not being sincere. He's just trying to be a crappy human being. But this is the problem: is it's an old lie with a new flavor. All this anti-Semitism, all the stuff that's coming from all these people, and I see it. I see it. Even young people that I know. I see it, and they all say, but did you see? And it's all these flavors that are out there of all the same garbage, just different flavor. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. So now, what does real biblical conservatism look like? Real biblical conservatism is basing your life and your focus and your worldview off of the Bible and the principles that the Bible shows. And when you believe the Bible sincerely and for real, you're not one of those people that's out there saying, I'm a gay pastor and da. You look at the Bible and you say, what is the Bible saying? Not what do I want the Bible to say? But what does the Bible say? Stop putting your presuppositions in there and making it up. What does the Bible say? And when you look at that you realize that through that lens, you can say China is a place that has abandoned God, has abandoned any kind of belief in the Bible, belief in like any religion really. And that because of that, it is rotting and is falling apart. We can see that Iran's regime, again, totally opposite of the Bible, with the Muslim beliefs, is so horrible and wicked that it has completely separated itself from God, where it's saying that not even is it okay to hurt people and hurt women, that the Ayatollah was supporting and encouraging his guards to rape virgin women that were in jail as political prisoners before they were killed so they don't go to their version of heaven. None of that sounds like anything that we should believe, ever. And we know this. We know this because when you go back to the Bible, you'll understand how we're supposed to treat our enemies, how we're supposed to deal with all of these issues. And honestly, part of this is rooting out the ones that are crazy. And then a step further, the Democrats. You can see how because they want one thing from you, and that one thing that they want from you is for you to say it's okay for all of their sins. That's what they want. And so it doesn't matter whatever alliances they need to make. They'll make whatever alliances they need with whomever they need to make you, force you to agree that whatever sin that they want is good and okay. That's why they're encouraging child mutilation. That's why they're encouraging these gay marriages and so on, and forcing all this stuff and just forcing the propaganda on your children, because they want to take the onus off of themselves. They want to take away the conviction that God is putting on their lives. They want to take that away, and how they take it away is by forcing you to say that it's okay. And that's why they have to have affirmation and all that stuff. If you know that what you're doing is right, you don't need affirmation because you know it. Now, the saddest part of it all is that there are those that used to be good in our party, in the conservative movement, that used to care about conserving things. And I'm including Glenn Beck in that, by the way. Glenn Beck failed miserably. When he was told to have a conversation about Candace, he said no. When he even himself says, when good men are silent, evil wins. And why is that? Because if we don't call this out for what it is, it festers and it grows and it festers and it grows. And why has this movement on the right gone so crazy? Because we haven't been calling it out. We haven't been dealing with it. And the sad part is one of our strongest people who could have helped with this was Charlie Kirk. And he was assassinated and removed from us. And so we have to do it on our own. We have to make sure we're standing up and making the right principles in our life and spreading our understanding of God's word. And we are spreading the goodness of conservatism around the world so that we can have a world to give to our children, and we can continue reaching souls for Jesus Christ, the lost are out there with no hope, like the people in China. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help the channel, and I hope it affects someone today, and that we can make an effect, a ripple effect around the world, where we can help them understand not just the news, but why the news is so important. Thank you so much.